Between 1921 and 2020, the US Mint has produced over 500 billion coins. So let's be honest with ourselves for a second. The chances of finding something like this $1,000 coin, the 1909 SVDB wheat penny, which already has a mintage figure below $500,000 to begin with, not to mention the fact that it's so widely recognized that the majority have been picked out of circulation, any given penny you pick up probably has a chance around 1 in 50 to 1 in 500 million of actually being one of these coins. So with that in mind, I wanted to make this video all about the valuable coins that you actually could find because they have larger mintage figures and they're not so valuable that they've been completely cherry picked out of every collection. So especially if you know where to look on eBay, you can get these coins on the cheap. First, I want to get into a few of the coins from the 30s because I guarantee that if you've bought a lot of wheat pennies, some of these have passed by your hands without you even realizing that they're worth a few dollars a piece or maybe even around $10 in decent condition versus only being worth around 5 to 10 cents like the pennies around them. So we're talking about 50 or 100 times value increase. And I know it doesn't sound like much money, a couple of dollars, but if you had 10 or 20 of these pass by your hands, that starts to add up pretty fast. A really good example of this is the 1938 Denver and San Francisco minted wheat cent because these only have a mintage figure of 20 and 15.2 million respectively, despite the fact that the Philadelphia has 156.7 million, and you can see the 1939 316.5 million. Then you can see down there 1939 Denver again is a very low minted coin, and they might only be selling for $3 a coin on eBay, but here's a good example of what I'm talking about. For just 25 1938 Denver cents, this person paid $50 plus the shipping cost. So that means they were paying $2 a coin for coins that you might have been selling for 10 or 15 cents a piece if you just sold them like any other wheat cent from the 30s. And this goes for some of the coins from the earlier 1930s as well. I'm going to hold off on talking about a few in particular that are a little bit more rare, but even something like the 1931 plain, that coin is worth a few dollars. 1933 plain, 1932 plain especially, that's under 10 million, or the 1932 Denver, even something like the 1934 Denver, that could be a low enough mintage to definitely be worth at least around $2 instead of that much lower figure that we were just talking about. Something like the 1930 is going to be so common that it's more like 10 cents. And going back into the 1920s, this trend will continue. There's a lot of coins that are very common, but a few do stand out and they're definitely obtainable. Something like the 1928S is a little bit lower mintage, the 27S or even the 27D for that matter could definitely be worth a little bit more. Something like the 1926S is going to be a little bit harder to find, but that's definitely a coin that still is obtainable, and it's going to be worth a little bit more than any of the coins we've been talking about, probably a little bit closer to $10, especially when it's in decent condition, just because it's a bit of a lower mintage. You can see under 5 million, but that's going to be pretty hard to find, especially in terms of trying to buy a collection on eBay and having the person not advertise that, because that's going to drive up the value. Going back into the earlier 20s, you're going to find that the 1922D and especially the 24D are very similar to the 26S in that they're going to be extremely hard to find. But something like the 1921 or the 1924S does have a bit of value and is definitely common enough to still find. Even the 1923S with its lower mintage figure, I do think could still be found out there. You can see it doesn't always command an insanely high price, but I would say that's a coin to be on the lookout for because it's right in that value range where if you do start finding them, you're going to be adding up your money pretty fast. You should probably know this now. Anything from 1919, no matter what the mint mark is just worth absolutely nothing. And this even goes back into like the 1918 range. I guess the S is okay, but that's still such a high mintage, I wouldn't really bother looking for those. If you do find one, I wouldn't say to throw it away, certainly. It could be worth like 50 cents, but you're probably not going to get a couple of dollars for it is my point. Now, something like, for example, the 1915S, that's going to be a hard find, but this coin does command a pretty fair price if you do ever find it, so definitely be on the lookout because you can see just how fast having a few different years really starts to add up some value. But we're getting to a point where the less common coins have low enough mintages and are just old enough where you're not going to be finding them pretty much ever, especially coin roll hunting or even in old collections unless you really know where to look. So I'm not trying to say it's going to be easy, especially something like, for example, the 1914 Denver penny, which you can see only has a 1.2 million mintage and is far too iconic to slip by pretty much anybody who knows what they're they're doing whatsoever. But to finish it off, there are a few coins from the earlier 1910s that you might have a chance of finding. Something like the 1911 Denver Mint, for example, is common enough where people might not pick it out of a collection, just not realizing that it's probably worth a few dollars, especially in decent shape. Or the 1913 Denver, especially something like the 1913 San Francisco. That's right up there in that range where it has some value, but it's not going to be noticed by everybody immediately. But this is why most of the old wheat pennies that you find are going to be Philadelphia minted, because you can see that there's a huge difference between 1909 Philadelphia, 1910 Philadelphia, 1911, etc. To the point where, honestly, I would just say that anything made before 1915 that has a mint mark, you should separate from the rest of your super old wheat pennies, because they're worth at least a few dollars a piece, if not way more, especially when you start to get to stuff like the 1909S. But I don't think one of you guys are going to be finding that unless you're super lucky. Let me know your best find in the comments, because I really want to hear how you've been doing, whether it's from coin roll hunting or buying old wheat pennies like I like to do. But I'm going to be going through a bunch of different finds from eBay, or I should just say purchases. There are things I found that I think are decent deals where I managed to pay 10 or 15 cents a coin for some older wheat pennies myself. So I'm going to be searching through for semi-key dates, exactly like the coins I was talking about in this video. So let's see if I can find any of them, because I really do think they're out there in very basic collections. And with that being said, thanks for watching the whole thing. Peace.